She was the perfect daughter, untouchable, never wrong, always on top. Then Thanksgiving came and I finally rose and spilled the truth I'd held back. Forks halted, her grin disappeared, and the room fell dead quiet. With one sentence, what I revealed shattered our entire family order. Have you ever felt like you were just a shadow, living in someone else's blinding spotlight? I spent my whole life that way, but then came Thanksgiving, and a single thrown wine glass didn't just splatter red on the carpet. Oh no, it shattered my family's perfect lie, revealing a truth so ugly, so raw. No one was ready for it, especially not me. From the moment I was old enough to notice, I learned the script. My sister, Clara, got the bigger slice of cake. When I asked my mom, Eleanor, why, she'd just smile, pat my head and say, because she's special, honey. And that, right there, was the beginning. I was the background character, the footnote. Clara, she was the shining star, the miracle, the center of the universe. She's 33 now, with a sharp jawline, an even sharper tongue, and a fan club of relatives convinced she descended from the heavens. Me. My name's Alex. I'm 30, and for most of my life, I just played my role, kept my head down, and tried not to ruffle those perfectly feathered wings. But this year's Thanksgiving, man, it didn't go how anyone expected. Especially not Clara. And definitely not my mom, who had what I can only describe as a psychological eclipse right in the middle of dinner. Not even my dad, Robert, who sat there for 10 whole seconds before whispering something that almost made me laugh out loud. But before we get to the wine throwing, the tears, and the whispered accusations, let me tell you how we even got there. This wasn't just one bad dinner. This was years in the making. A slow, silent pressure building until it finally cracked wide open at the worst possible time. We grew up in a small Indiana town where everyone knew your business. My parents, Robert and Eleanor, were both teachers. Strict but fair, everyone said. But that only really applied if your name was Clara. Clara could do no wrong. Straight A's, ballet, honor societies. Every magnet-worthy accomplishment was hers. When she walked into a room, my parents practically stood at attention. She didn't just bring home report cards. She brought home prophecies. Clara's going places. Clara's going to be a doctor. Clara's going to change the world. Meanwhile, if I brought home A B+ in algebra, I got the look, and a reminder that I needed to try harder. Look, I wasn't a bad kid. I kept to myself, got decent grades, played guitar, worked at a bike shop. But I wasn't spectacular. Not in their eyes. And maybe that would have been fine if they just treated us equally. But they didn't. Not even close. I still remember one Christmas. Clara was 15, I was 12. She opened her gift. A brand new, sleek white MacBook. I opened mine. A stack of used books about learning to focus. My dad put his hand on my shoulder and said, "These will help you catch up to your sister." That was the year I stopped asking for anything. Fast forward to college. Clara went to Northwestern. Full ride, pre-med, fancy internships, the whole package. I applied to a small state school with a good computer science program. Got in, no fanfare. When I told my parents I was majoring in computer engineering, my mom blinked and said, "Oh, but Clara's working in oncology. Isn't that exciting?" That was the beginning of my silent years. I stopped trying to impress them. I stopped sharing updates. Didn't tell them about my research assistantship or graduating with honors. Didn't tell them I moved to Seattle and landed my first six-figure job. They didn't ask, and I didn't offer. Deep down, I already knew what they thought of me. But here's the thing. Sometimes being ignored gives you space. Space to work, to build, to grow without interference. Over the years, I taught myself everything about machine learning, data architecture, back-end systems. I joined a startup at 25 that got acquired 2 years later. Took my payout, invested half, and built my own company from the ground up. We specialized in AI optimization for logistics. By 29, I had 11 employees, major clients, and a net worth just shy of $7.2 million. I lived in a modest condo, drove a used Lexus. I kept it quiet. I still called home sometimes, visited for holidays, played my part. "How's work?" they'd ask. "It's going well," I'd say. And then they'd immediately pivot to Clara's latest grant or her fiancé, Dr. Victor Maxwell, who my mom kept calling our future son-in-law, and an actual neurosurgeon. Isn't that incredible? I swear I could have told them I was designing a spaceship, and they'd still ask what color scrubs Clara wore. Now, I have to say this. I didn't hate my sister. Not at first. She was just doing her thing. I was doing mine. But over time, things shifted. She got colder, smugger. Like she'd started to believe the press releases our parents wrote about her. At family gatherings, she'd say things like, "So, Alex, are you still doing computers?" And when I'd say, "Yes," she'd chuckle and say, "Well, hey, we need tech guys too." That tech guy comment really stuck with me, especially because she said it last Thanksgiving, swirling a glass of red wine while telling everyone how Victor had been invited to speak at a symposium in Geneva. My parents clapped like seals. I just nodded, then went out to the porch and stayed there for most of the night. So this year, I decided to do something different. No grand reveal, no sports car, no tux. I just decided I wasn't going to hide anymore. I'd answer questions honestly. I'd speak up. I wouldn't downplay what I'd built. Not out of spite, not out of pride, just because I was tired of pretending I was still that 12-year-old with the self-help books. Thanksgiving was at my parents' house again. Clara and Victor were already there when I arrived. She hugged me like I was a distant relative. "Wow, you clean up nice." I was wearing a button-up and jeans. Nothing fancy. Victor shook my hand, that firm, overcompensating squeeze some men due to remind you who's taller. Dinner started fine. Turkey, mashed potatoes, the usual. Mom had placed name cards this year for the first time ever. Clara at the head, Victor next to her. I was 2 spots down, between Uncle David and the sideboard. I didn't mind. I'd been seated closer to the garage once. The first crack came when my cousin Sophia, 19 and majoring in graphic design, asked me what I did. "I run a software company," I said casual. My mom jumped in. "Oh, Alex does IT support, I think." I paused. "Not quite. I founded a company that builds AI tools for optimizing freight and logistics. We've got contracts with some major shipping firms." There was a beat of silence. Victor raised an eyebrow. "Like, what kind of contracts?" I smiled. "Last quarter, we onboarded a client with an annual logistics spend of around $400 million. We helped them reduce waste and increase speed using predictive algorithms. It's been going well." My dad blinked. "You never mentioned that before." I shrugged. "I guess no one asked." Clara laughed. "That's cute, Alex. You always did have a vivid imagination." Sophia leaned forward. "Wait, are you serious? That sounds insane." I pulled out my phone, opened our website, and slid it over to her. "Here, that's us." She scrolled, eyes widening. "This is legit." That was the moment the temperature in the room changed. It was subtle, but I felt it, like someone had turned the volume down on the Clara show for the first time in decades. My mom looked confused. My dad looked stunned. Clara looked annoyed. Not threatened yet, but definitely annoyed. Victor just poured more wine. The questions started coming faster. Uncle David asked how many people I employed. Aunt Carol asked what city I lived in now. My parents didn't say much, but they kept glancing at each other like they were trying to do the math in their heads. And then Clara asked the question that finally cracked the mask. "So, Alex, be honest. How much do you actually make? Like, salary-wise?" I paused. I could have laughed it off, dodged it, said something vague, but I didn't. Not this time. Last year, about $850,000 in salary and bonuses, but most of my wealth is in equity. Equity! She scoffed. Company shares. I own 83% of the business. The silence that followed was loud. You could hear the clink of a fork on porcelain from across the room. And then my mom very softly said, "You're joking." I shook my head. "Nope." And that was when things started to spiral. Clara leaned back, arms crossed, and muttered, "That's ridiculous." My mom's eyes started to glisten. My dad looked at me like I just told him I was moving to Mars, but no one said anything else for a few seconds. Then Victor chuckled, slow and condescending. "Come on, man. If that were true, why are you living in a condo and driving a 10-year-old Lexus?" I looked him in the eye. "Because I don't need to prove anything." Clara snorted. "Wow. So, you've just been lying to everyone this whole time." That's when my mom stood up. Her voice cracked when she said, "You lied to us, Alex. And I just stared at her, stunned. Not at the words, but at how fast the script flipped. But before I could even respond, Clara grabbed her wine glass and threw it. The room froze. The wine glass didn't shatter. That's the first thing I remember. How it should have shattered like in a movie, red wine splashing everywhere. Instead, it bounced. It landed sideways on the carpet by the china cabinet, rolling lazily to a stop while the wine soaked deep into the fibers. My mother gasped like someone had died. My father stood up abruptly, his chair scraping across the hardwood floor, jaw twitching like he wanted to say something but couldn't figure out where to begin. And Clara, she just sat there, arms crossed, breathing heavily through her nose like some self-righteous dragon who just torched a village and was waiting for applause. I can't believe this, my mom finally said, voice trembling. Why? Why would you hide something like this from us, Alex? That part still gets me. Hide. Like I'd stashed nuclear secrets or faked my death for insurance money. I didn't even know how to respond at first. My brain kept stuttering over the wine on the floor. The fact that I had just been accused, not of doing something wrong, but of being something wrong. I wasn't hiding anything, I said slowly, keeping my tone calm. I just stopped trying to impress people who didn't want to listen. Dad scoffed. That's not fair. I looked at him. Isn't it? He opened his mouth, closed it, looked at Clara like she might help him form a sentence, then sat back down heavily. He didn't say another word for 5 straight minutes. Meanwhile, my mom turned her attention back to me, visibly trying to compose herself. She smoothed down the front of her sweater like that would settle her nerves. Alex, sweetheart, you have to understand how this looks. We're your parents. We should have known. You should have told us. You never asked, I repeated. We assumed you were doing okay. We didn't expect this. She gestured vaguely toward me, like I was wearing a crown I didn't deserve. It's just a lot to take in. I could feel every eye at the table flicking back and forth between me and her like a tennis match. Cousin Sophia had gone quiet, her fork suspended midair. Uncle David was chewing mechanically, pretending to be invisible. Even Victor looked like he didn't quite know which team he was supposed to be on. Clara broke the silence again. You always had a chip on your shoulder, Alex. Honestly, this explains so much. Excuse me. She leaned forward, wine-stained lips curling into a smirk. You've always been resentful. I could feel it every time we were in the same room. You didn't like being the underachiever. And now what? This whole millionaire tech genius thing is supposed to make up for it. That did it. I looked at her dead in the eye and said, No, Clara, this isn't about you. She laughed. Full-on laughed. Oh, please. Of course it is. You had to make a scene. Had to steal the spotlight. Thanksgiving of all times. I didn't steal anything, I said. You just assumed I'd stay quiet forever. And then, as if on cue, my mother placed her hand over Clara's and said softly, Clara, honey, maybe we should all just take a breath. There it was again. That quiet gesture of comfort. That subtle alignment of sides. No one comforted me when the wine was thrown. No one asked if I was okay. They instinctively moved to protect her. Something in me cracked. I stood up slowly and picked up my plate. I think I'll eat in the living room. My mom blinked. Don't be dramatic. I'm not. I'm just done pretending this is normal. I walked out without waiting for a response. The silence that followed me was heavier than the food in my hand. In the living room, I sat down on the couch and started cutting into my turkey. My hands were steady, but my jaw was clenched so tight I could hear it clicking. A few minutes later, someone sat beside me. I expected Sophia, or maybe one of the aunts. It was Victor. Hey, he said casually. I didn't look up. Hey! He cleared his throat. So, you really built all that yourself? I finally turned toward him. Yeah, why? He gave a lopsided shrug. Just surprised, that's all. I always figured Clara was the overachiever in the family. She is, I said. At least that's the official story. He chuckled like we were two guys swapping stories over beers. Man, she's going to lose it over this. She already did. I tilted my head toward the dining room. You know she's in there telling them you probably faked all of it, right? That this is some long game to make her look bad? I froze mid-bite. Of course she is. Victor leaned back against the couch, staring at the ceiling like he'd seen this movie before. You know, I used to think the family adoration was cute. Like, wow, they really love their daughter. But after a while I realized it's a cult. That caught me off guard. A cult. He nodded. You don't notice it until you're on the outside. Your mom talks about her like she's a myth. Your dad quotes her like a political speech. And Clara, she believes it. Every word of it. I've never met someone so obsessed with her own reflection. I stared at him for a second, trying to decide if this was a trap. Then why are you marrying her? He smirked. I didn't say I was. That shut me up. He stood up a moment later, brushing imaginary lint off his slacks. Just thought you should know what's being said back there. Good luck. And with that, he walked off, leaving me sitting there with a plate of turkey and 100 thoughts bouncing around in my skull like marbles in a tin can. A few minutes later, Sophia slipped in. She perched on the armrest like a bird testing the air. Hey, she said gently. That was intense. Yeah. She hesitated. I just wanted to say I think it's really cool what you've built. Like, I had no idea. They never talk about you, you know. That part stung more than I expected. I know. She glanced toward the hallway, then back at me. Anyway, just wanted you to hear that someone's proud of you. I nodded, grateful. Thanks. She left a minute later, and I returned to my thoughts. I kept waiting for someone, anyone, to come and apologize, but no one did. Instead, I heard the muffled sound of voices from the dining room, low and urgent. Then footsteps, then the unmistakable sound of my mom crying. Took everything in me not to roll my eyes, because I knew that cry. That wasn't the cry of someone hurt. It was the cry of someone cornered, of someone trying to summon sympathy before the narrative slipped out of her control. And sure enough, not 5 minutes later, my dad came in. He didn't sit down, just stood there awkwardly like a substitute teacher about to give a lecture he didn't write. Son, he began. I think it's time we had a serious conversation. Here we go. I placed my plate down on the coffee table and leaned back, arms crossed. All right. He scratched the back of his neck. This whole situation, it's caught us off guard and I get it. You've been working hard. That's great, really. But the way this all came out, it was aggressive, disrespectful. Your mom's really shaken up. She's shaken up because I told the truth. No, he said quickly. She's shaken up because it felt like a betrayal. I actually laughed. A betrayal? You kept this part of your life hidden from us, and then just dropped it on Thanksgiving like a grenade. That's not fair, Alex. You know what's not fair? I said, voice rising. Spending 30 years being treated like a backup plan, while Clara got a standing ovation for breathing. His expression hardened. That's not true. Yes, it is, I said. Every birthday, every graduation, every family dinner, she was the main event and I was the intermission. He looked genuinely stunned, like he'd never even considered it before. Like the idea that their golden child narrative had collateral damage was brand new information. I'm not asking you to rewrite the past, I said quieter now. I'm just asking you to stop acting like I owe you guilt for doing something right. He stared at me for a long moment, then gave a tight nod. We'll talk more later. And just like that, he turned and walked away. No apology, no acknowledgement, just a retreat. By the time I went back to the dining room, dessert had been served. Pumpkin pie, whipped cream, coffee. No one looked at me, not even Clara. She sat stiffly, red-eyed, and silent, like she was mourning a tragedy no one else could see. I took my seat quietly and reached for a slice. As I lifted my fork, my mom finally broke the silence. Well, I hope you're happy. I paused mid-bite. Excuse me. You've humiliated your sister. You've embarrassed this family. And for what? To brag. I put the fork down. There it was. The final script rewrite. The last pivot. I was no longer the disappointment. I was the villain. And I knew right then and there that something fundamental had shifted. Something that couldn't be undone with polite smiles or obligatory phone calls. This wasn't just about a Thanksgiving dinner anymore. This was about the truth finally stepping into the light, and the people who couldn't bear to see it. But I wasn't done yet. Not even close. I didn't sleep that night. I left the dinner table after my mom's final jab, with a slice of cold pumpkin pie wrapped in a paper towel, and I drove back to my Airbnb in silence. No music, no calls. Just the quiet hum of tires against pavement and the slow burn of betrayal creeping into my chest. When I got to the Airbnb, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the slice of pie like it might answer the question I couldn't shake. How did telling the truth make me the villain? All my life, I had swallowed slights so small they seemed harmless on the surface. Comments, glances, omissions. But together, they built a wall I wasn't allowed to climb. And when I finally stood at the top, looking down from a place I'd built with my own hands, I was punished for not staying where they left me. I barely slept. My mind kept replaying my mother's face when I told her the truth. Not proud, not curious, not surprised, hurt. Like I had stabbed her in the back. By morning, I had 3 texts. One from Sophia, "You okay?" Yesterday was, "Yeah, let me know if you want to get out of the house today." One from Victor, "They're spinning. Just FYI. Might want to get ahead of it." And one from my mother, "Call me. We need to talk about what happened." I ignored all 3 for an hour while I drank weak coffee and stared at a blank TV screen. Then curiosity got the best of me and I called her. She picked up on the second ring. "Alex." Her voice was tight, rehearsed. "I'm glad you called. You asked me to." Pause. "Well, yes. I wanted to clear the air." I waited. "I've been thinking," she continued, "and I realized things got out of hand yesterday. Emotions were high, but your sister is still processing everything, and so are we. This was a lot to take in." I noticed. She ignored the tone. "We've always wanted the best for you, but Clara, she's had to work so hard to get where she is, right?" "And I haven't," I said. "You know that's not what I meant." "It's exactly what you meant, Mom. That's always what you've meant." Another pause. I could hear her breathing through her nose like she used to when she was annoyed I hadn't emptied the dishwasher. "I think it would be a good idea," she said finally, "if you apologize to your sister." That actually made me laugh. "You're kidding. She's devastated. You humiliated her in front of the entire family. You ambushed us, Alex." I sat there in stunned silence for a few seconds. "You think I planned that?" "Well," she hesitated. "It certainly felt like a performance." "A performance would have involved fireworks and a saxophone solo," I shot back. "I answered a question." "You showed off," she snapped, finally dropping the gentle tone. "You made her feel small on purpose. You embarrassed her." I could feel something inside me twisting. Not rage. Not yet, but a slow, tightening coil of clarity. "Mom," I said, voice low, "you do realize that she threw wine at me, right? That she insulted me? That you accused me of lying? But somehow you're more upset that people stopped clapping for her for 5 minutes." She didn't respond. "I'm not apologizing for being successful," I said. "And I'm definitely not apologizing for your discomfort." She exhaled sharply. "Then I don't know what else there is to say. Maybe nothing." And I hung up. That was the moment something snapped in me. Not out of anger, but resolve. For the first time, I saw the situation not as a wounded son desperate for approval, but as a man realizing he didn't owe anyone anything anymore. But the betrayal didn't end there. 2 days later, I got a text from Victor. Just 3 words. "Check your email." I did. And what I saw made my stomach drop. Attached was a forwarded thread from Clara's email. It had been sent to several people in the family. Uncle David, Aunt Carol, even Grandma Evelyn. The subject line, concerning Alex's claims. The email was several paragraphs long. I read it 3 times just to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding. In it, Clara calmly and professionally questioned the legitimacy of my company. She said she'd done a little digging and couldn't verify any of my client contracts. She implied that I might be involved in shady tech dealings or overstating my success for personal validation. She even said I might be in a manic phase. At the end, she included a casual line. "I say all of this with love. I just think we need to be cautious before we enable any delusions. Alex clearly needs support, not applause. Support, not applause." I sat there stunned. Not because she doubted me, but because she was trying to make everyone else doubt me, too. And it worked. Within hours, I got 2 more emails. One from Aunt Carol asking if I'd exaggerated my story, and one from my mom. "Alex, your sister showed me the emails. I'm not sure what's going on, but I think you need help. We love you, but we're worried. Let us in." That one broke me. Let us in. Where had they been when I was a teenager building code in my bedroom because I had no one to talk to? Where were they when I got my first patent approved, or when I landed my first client? "Let us in." They had never even knocked. I called Victor. He picked up on the first ring. "I'm assuming you saw it." "Yeah," I said, still trying to process. "What is wrong with her?" He sighed. "You want the truth? Always. She's always been like this, but this is new. This is next level. She's trying to destroy my credibility. She's scared. The crown slipped, and she's grabbing at anything to keep it." I paused. "Why did you send it to me?" "Because you deserve to know. And because I think I might be done with all this." There was something final in his voice. "You're leaving her?" "I don't know yet," he said. "But I see it now. The manipulation, the control, the way your parents feed it." We were quiet for a while. Then he said, "You should come back. Say nothing. Just show up." "To what?" "Let them keep painting me as the delusional brother." "No," he said. "To show them you're not going anywhere. To remind them you don't need their approval." I didn't respond, but the idea planted itself like a seed. The next day, I went back to my parents' house. I didn't call ahead. I just knocked on the door around 3 p.m., wearing jeans and a black coat, holding a thick folder in my hand. My mom answered, surprised. "Alex, are you all right?" "I'd like to talk," I said, stepping inside. She hesitated, then nodded. My dad was in the living room. Clara was on the couch with a cup of tea and a smug expression that faltered the moment she saw the folder in my hand. "Good," she said, setting her cup down. "I'm glad you came. We really need to discuss." "No," I interrupted. "I need to say something." They all froze. I sat down across from them and placed the folder on the table. Slowly, deliberately, I opened it and began laying out documents: company registration, bank statements, a redacted client contract, the most recent valuation letter from our accountant, shareholder breakdowns, tax filings, photos from the last investor meeting. Then I opened my laptop and played a short 2-minute clip from a conference I'd spoken at a few months ago in San Diego. I was on stage fielding questions about neural network scalability. When it ended, I looked at them. "I didn't want to do this," I said. "I didn't want to prove anything, but since someone decided to smear me behind my back, I figured it was time to bring receipts." My dad's face was unreadable. My mom looked like someone had unplugged her brain. And Clara's expression twisted into something bitter and unfamiliar. "I never meant to smear you," she said, voice trembling. "You accused me of being mentally unstable," I said. "You sent emails to the entire family saying I fabricated everything." "I was just worried," she snapped. "You ambushed us. You lied." "I never lied," I said louder now. "I just stopped telling you things because you didn't care. And now that I've built something real, something bigger than anything you imagined for me, you're trying to tear it down because it doesn't fit the story you wrote." "You're twisting this," she said, standing now. "You think you're so perfect? You think just because you made some money." "It's not about money," I interrupted. "It's about respect, about finally being seen. And you, all of you, can't handle the fact that I did it without you." My mom stepped forward as if to calm things, but I raised a hand. "No, I'm not here for a group hug. I'm here to set the record straight." I packed up the folder, slid the laptop back into my bag, and stood. "For the last time," I said, looking Clara dead in the eye, "I'm not your shadow, and I never was." Then I walked out, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I owed anyone an explanation. I wasn't running away from the family I grew up with. I was walking toward the man I had become. I thought walking out of that house would feel like closure, that I'd finally get to slam the door shut on decades of second place and sit with the satisfaction of having stood my ground. But the truth is, I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow, like I just lit a match in a room full of my childhood memories and watched them all go up in smoke. The silence that followed my exit was deafening. No one chased after me. No one called out my name. No apology, no acknowledgement, just the sound of the door quietly closing behind me as I stepped into the crisp Indiana air and walked to my car. When I pulled out of the driveway, I didn't know where I was going. I just drove through the neighborhoods I used to bike through as a kid, past the library where I'd first taught myself to code on their ancient, humming computers, down the street where Clara once won a community science fair for building a vinegar and baking soda volcano that our mom talked about for 6 straight months, past the diner where we used to go for pancakes after Sunday church, where Clara would get an extra scoop of whipped cream, and I'd be told, "You can have more once you finish. What's on your plate?" Every landmark felt tainted, like I was walking through a museum curated by someone who had written me out of the script entirely. I finally stopped at a park, empty except for a squirrel tearing into a discarded sandwich wrapper near a bench. I sat down, letting the wind bite through my coat, and tried to think. But there was nothing left to think about, only feel. And I felt tired, not just physically, but deep in the bone, exhausted. I had fought so hard to become someone worth noticing. And in the moment where it finally mattered, when I pulled back the curtain and showed them what I'd built, they didn't see me. They saw a threat to their story. And stories, especially family ones, don't change easily. It would have been easier if they had just stayed quiet. But they didn't, because the next morning it got worse. A new email from my mom. The subject line, "Alex, we need to discuss boundaries." I opened it with shaking hands. I don't know why I thought, even for a second, it might be an olive branch. It wasn't. She wrote that she and my father had talked it over and decided that my presence at Christmas might be too disruptive this year. That my outburst had created tension in the family. That Clara was still recovering emotionally. That maybe some space would be healthier for everyone. Space. Like I was radioactive. Like I hadn't just spent the last decade sacrificing sleep and sanity to build something meaningful, while they were too busy clapping for someone else's success to even ask how I was doing. I closed the email without responding. Then I shut my laptop. Then I sat there in the Airbnb kitchen with my hands pressed to my face. And for the first time in years, I cried. Not big sobs, not cinematic tears streaming down my face. Just quiet, tight-chested grief. The kind that leaks out in slow drops and tastes like mourning. Because that's what it was. I wasn't mourning a person. I was mourning the idea of a family. One I'd spent years pretending I was a part of, one that had never really been mine. And it hit me in that moment that I had spent my whole life trying to earn their respect. And maybe I never would. I stayed in Indiana longer than planned. I'd originally booked the Airbnb for 4 days. I extended it to 10. I didn't go out, didn't see friends, didn't even answer most texts. Sophia checked in a few times, and I sent her polite responses. Victor texted once more, just a thumbs-up emoji, and the words, "Saw the fallout. Good for you." But I didn't reply. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I was just done. Emotionally fried. And more than that, I was ashamed. Not of who I was, but of how long I'd let them decide who that was supposed to be. I ordered in food. I binged mindless shows I'd already seen. I read a book on leadership I couldn't absorb. I told myself I was relaxing, but I wasn't. I was grieving quietly alone. And when I finally gathered the strength to check my phone again, I saw what I had missed. A post from Clara on Facebook, a smiling selfie caption, "Grateful for family this Thanksgiving, and for the strength to rise above toxic people, even when they share your DNA." I stared at it for a long time. The comments were exactly what you'd expect. "You're so strong, Clara. Ignore the haters. You shine no matter what. They're just jealous of your success. Family isn't always blood. Stay close to the ones who support you." I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because that post told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't just rewriting the narrative. She was weaponizing it. I was now the toxic brother, the ungrateful one, the liar, the dramatic embarrassment who tried to overshadow her at Thanksgiving. And everyone was buying it. Or at least everyone who mattered in that insular little family bubble. It was almost funny. All this time, I'd worked in silence, built a life, made something real. And in one weekend, my own family decided that reality was less believable than Clara's version of events. And worse, they preferred hers. It wasn't just that they didn't believe me. It's that they wanted not to. Because if I was telling the truth, then what did that say about them? It was easier to cast me as the unstable one, the outburst, the black sheep, because then they didn't have to face the years of neglect, the favoritism, the quiet cruelty they swore was just normal parenting. I could have fought back. I had proof. I had money. I had a bigger platform than they knew. But I didn't. Because in that moment, I realized something I'd been too hurt to see before. You don't win by proving them wrong. You win by walking away. And so that's what I started doing. Quietly, one step at a time. I canceled the auto-renewal on the family cloud photo account I'd been paying for. I unfollowed Clara on every platform. I turned off email notifications from my mother. I blocked my father's number, not out of rage, but because I knew he wouldn't call anyway, and I didn't want to keep looking at the silence. Then I opened a spreadsheet, and I started making a plan. Not a revenge plan. Not yet, but a life plan. One that didn't orbit them. One where the center of my universe wasn't the hope of getting invited to Christmas, or the pathetic thrill of a half-hearted, "We're proud of you." No, I was done waiting for their applause. And as I stared at the blinking cursor in the spreadsheet, I realized something that sent a chill down my spine. They had no idea what I was really capable of. They thought the success I'd shared was the climax, but it wasn't. It was just the prologue. I left Indiana in the middle of a snowstorm. Not metaphorically. An actual, heavy, blizzard-style whiteout that swept across the state 2 days before my Airbnb reservation ended. It was like the universe wanted to put a final period on my time there, to make it as cold and brutal on the outside as it had been on the inside. I packed my bags, loaded my laptop and files into the back seat, and started the long drive to Chicago, where my flight home waited. The roads were slick, the radio was low, and I drove mostly in silence. But in that silence, something strange happened. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurt. I wasn't trying to rehearse a speech in my head or imagine a gotcha moment that would turn the family tide. I felt light, like I'd finally stopped dragging a wagon full of bricks behind me. Bricks labeled, "Prove yourself. Make them proud. Maybe this time they'll listen." It was over. Not because I had lost, but because I had finally stopped playing. And that's when the rise truly began. Not with some dramatic viral post or revenge scheme, but with the peace that came from letting go. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of space. My space. And I was going to build something new in it. Back in Seattle, my condo felt like stepping into an alternate life, like I had passed through a mirror and returned to a world that hadn't changed while I had completely transformed. The plants on my windowsill were still alive, barely. My neighbor's cat still patrolled the hallway like he paid rent. My startup Slack channel still pinged with deadlines and bugs and inside jokes. But I wasn't the same Alex who left for Indiana. Not anymore. The first thing I did was schedule an all-hands meeting with my team. I logged in, turned on my camera, and saw all the familiar faces pop up. Jessica from marketing, Mark from sales, Raj from product, and 3 of the original devs who had helped me build the backbone of the company from scratch. And when they all settled in, waiting for me to talk, I didn't give them the usual weekly update. I gave them a story. I told them about Thanksgiving. I told them, without naming names, about being treated like an afterthought my whole life, about building in silence, about the moment I finally spoke the truth, and what happened next. And then I said, I want this company to be a place where no one ever has to shrink themselves to survive. Where no one ever feels like their story has to be watered down, so someone else can feel bigger. No one said anything at first. Then Jessica smiled and said, "Well, damn. That's the best Monday kickoff I've ever heard." Raj clapped. Mark typed in the chat, "Alex, main character energy." That meeting changed the tone of everything. Over the next few months, we didn't just grow, we exploded. We closed 2 new clients in Q1, both of them referred through connections who had seen our work online. One of our use case demo videos went semi-viral on LinkedIn, and we started getting attention from venture funds. I did 2 podcast interviews and 1 TED-style conference talk. And for the first time, I didn't downplay our success. I didn't act like we were just a small shop, because we weren't. We were making waves in one of the most competitive tech spaces in the country, and I was the one at the helm. With growth came money, more than I'd ever really known what to do with. I upgraded my condo, not to a mansion, but to a sleek, modern townhouse with a rooftop garden and space for a recording studio. I started working with a personal trainer 3 times a week. I hired a financial advisor, not because I was worried about losing money, but because I wanted to learn how to move it, how to make it work for causes I cared about. And I began investing quietly, strategically, not just in tech, but in people. I reached out to small business owners with good ideas but no resources, artists who needed grants, coders and underrepresented communities who just needed someone to believe in them. I created a micro-investment fund and called it First Shadow, a name that meant nothing to anyone else but everything to me, because I'd lived in the shadow, and now I was giving others the light. A few weeks after launch, I got an email from Sophia. Subject line, have you seen this? Attached was a screenshot of a Facebook thread. A family cousin had posted about exciting career opportunities in the tech field, and someone in the comments had said, "You should talk to Alex. I heard he's doing something huge out in Seattle." Underneath that, a comment from my mother, "Let's not exaggerate. He's always been a bit theatrical." That one stung. Not because it was shocking, but because it was expected. That's who she'd always be. Who they'd all always be. And I wasn't going to change it. But I didn't have to anymore, because for every one of them, there were 10 others now. People who saw me, respected me, believed in me. I was building something bigger than a company, bigger than revenge. I was building a legacy. The next milestone came 6 months after Thanksgiving. A major logistics firm, one of the top 5 in the country, signed a 7-figure deal with us. I flew out personally to finalize it. At the signing table, their CEO looked at me and said, "I have to admit, when your name came across my desk, I thought you were older." "I get that a lot," I said. "What you've built is impressive," she added. "And fast. Where did you learn to do all this?" I smiled. "In a quiet house," I said, "with a lot of time to think." She didn't ask more, just nodded. Sometimes the people who get you don't need the full story. A week later, I got a call from Victor. We hadn't spoken in months. I answered, unsure of what I'd hear. "Hey," he said. "We never really finished our last conversation." I said nothing, letting the silence carry the weight. "She knows," he continued. "She knows I'm done. I left, packed up, and moved out 3 weeks ago. She's still telling people I'm just taking space to find myself, but I filed the paperwork already." He let out a breath. "She's unraveling, Alex. Not just about the relationship. About you." "What do you mean?" "She keeps bringing you up, asking why you get attention now. Why everyone's talking about you. It's eating her alive." "That's not what I wanted," I said quietly. "I know," he replied. "But it's what happened." I didn't ask how the rest of the family took the breakup. I didn't care. I only asked one thing. "Do you regret it?" He paused. "No," he said. "Not anymore." It was around that time I started getting media attention. Nothing huge, just mid-tier tech blogs and a few industry newsletters. But one story really caught fire. It was titled, "The Quiet Millionaire Who Built a Logistics Empire Without a Whiff of Silicon Valley." It told the story of a soft-spoken founder who built a multi-million-dollar AI company without venture capital, without legacy family support, and without the noise of self-promotion. It talked about first shadow, about how I was investing in others, about how I believed in building something real, not just something loud. The story went viral in a way I wasn't expecting. New followers, new connections, invitations to panels, podcasts, summits. People love the idea of a quiet disruptor. And while I appreciated the attention, I didn't need it, because I knew the truth. I hadn't done any of this for the spotlight. I did it to stop shrinking. And now there was no going back. Of all the ways the story could have ended, I never thought it would be a wedding invitation that pulled me back in. It arrived in the mail one morning, tucked between a property tax notice and a flyer for luxury tile installation. I didn't recognize the envelope at first. Gold trim, heavy cardstock, my name written in a perfectly rehearsed script that tried too hard to look handwritten. Inside was a save-the-date card for Clara and Victor's wedding, June 14th, 4 p.m., Heritage Ridge Country Club. I sat there in my kitchen, coffee still steaming beside me, and just stared at it. She was actually doing it. After everything. After the Thanksgiving wine throwing, the smear emails, the quiet character assassination, the breakup Victor himself had told me about, she was pretending like none of it happened. And then I looked closer at the card. It wasn't just a standard wedding invite. It was a showcase. There was a full-blown insert listing the venue, dress code, registry links, charity donation options, and even a QR code that opened a digital memory book with their engagement story, which, for the record, was a lie. I remember the real story. She told it over Thanksgiving dinner last year, and it didn't involve any of the poetic lines she'd now written into her fairy tale. But what got me most of all, a list of featured speakers. There were 3 names. One was her college mentor, one was a close friend from med school, and the third Robert Hayes, father of the bride toastmaster. No mention of me. Not as a guest speaker, not even as a groomsman, just my name on the invite, tucked in with 120 other guests. And knowing Clara, that meant I was a seat filler, a prop, another pair of clapping hands in the audience while she played the starring role in her curated Cinderella moment. But here's what Clara didn't know. I had already started my revenge. Not the screaming kind. Not the petty, obvious kind, but the kind that moves quietly in the background, like a chess player sacrificing pawns for positioning. And by the time that wedding came around, checkmate would already be in motion. It started with a question. Not how to get revenge, but why? What did I want? A dramatic confrontation? A public takedown? No. What I wanted was simpler than that. I wanted truth. I wanted her to feel, in front of every person who ever praised her, the same sting I felt sitting at Thanksgiving year after year, hearing my own accomplishments treated like background noise. I wanted her perfect image to crack. Not through force, but through reality. And reality, as it turned out, was on my side. Because Victor had told me something months ago that I hadn't forgotten. She's unraveling. So I started looking. Not stalking, just observing. Every public post, every tagged photo, every professional profile, every small inconsistency between what she said and what was actually there. And it didn't take long before I found it. A discrepancy in her medical board certification. Now, let me be clear. I wasn't digging through private files. This was all public information, but her LinkedIn claimed she was board certified in neurology. Yet, the official state licensing board said she was still pending completion of her final specialization hours. In other words, she jumped the gun. And in the medical world, that's a big deal. Especially when your wedding is being framed as a networking gala with half the guest list made up of hospital executives and donors. It wasn't fraud, not legally, but it was definitely a lie, a calculated one, and it gave me exactly the thread I needed to start pulling. I reached out to a friend of mine named Maya, an investigative podcast host I had met during one of my TED-style events in Portland. Maya had built a reputation on peeling back polished veneers and exposing the truth underneath. Her last expose had gone viral after uncovering a nonprofit's misuse of grant funding. I told her about Clara, about the disparity in credentials, about the way she carefully sculpted her image for maximum applause. Maya was intrigued but cautious. "She's not running for office," she said. "Why should people care?" "Because this isn't about one lie," I told her. "It's about how many people believe it." I sent her the engagement story, the fabricated speeches, the screenshots from Thanksgiving, the Facebook post calling me toxic after I exposed the truth. I didn't beg. I didn't exaggerate. I just let the facts speak. And Maya agreed to feature Clara in a short-form series on professional pretenders, people who build elaborate public facades while quietly bending the truth behind the scenes. Nothing illegal, just curated deception. It would run the week before the wedding. I didn't give them the wedding date. They found it on their own. Meanwhile, I played the part. I RSVP'd, yes. I bought a tailored suit. Subtle, sharp, charcoal gray. I didn't ask to bring a +1, but I knew I wouldn't be coming alone because at the last minute, I invited a guest. Sophia. She had stayed quiet through all of this. Supportive but cautious. I didn't blame her. It's hard to choose sides when one side is the family you still have to see at Christmas. But when I told her what I was planning, not the specifics, just the broad strokes, she said one word. "I'm in." She booked a flight that night. The wedding day arrived with perfect weather. Clara wouldn't have allowed anything less. The venue looked like a scene out of a bridal magazine. Strings of fairy lights, glass chandeliers, floral arches. Guests arrived in tailored suits and floor-length dresses. Champagne flutes already half empty before the ceremony even began. I kept a low profile, mingled politely, shook hands, complimented centerpieces. But there was a weight to my silence now. People didn't dismiss me. They leaned in, asked what I'd been up to, made quiet jokes about the family genius finally coming out of hiding. The podcast episode had dropped that morning, and by 3 p.m., it had already hit 70,000 downloads. Not a takedown, just uncomfortable truth, titled The Sisterhood Effect, when applause becomes armor. I didn't need to quote it. Everyone already was. Snippets floated through the crowd in hushed murmurs. Did you know she's not actually board certified yet? The podcast said her engagement story was made up. I heard her brother runs some massive company. Why isn't he in the wedding party? There's something weird going on with that family. And Clara, she smiled through all of it. But I saw the strain, the micro-tightening around her eyes, the way her posture stiffened with every toast. The way her laugh got half a second too loud whenever someone mentioned the word podcast. She knew, but she couldn't react. Not without proving the story right. And that was the beauty of it. The revenge wasn't in destroying her. It was in making her live inside the truth she tried to bury. Every speech, every photo, every compliment, all of it now filtered through a lens she couldn't control. During dinner, I kept mostly to myself until Clara finally approached. She waited until Victor stepped away from the table, then slid into the seat across from me with a glass of wine in hand. The same vintage she threw at me last Thanksgiving. "I know what you did," she said under her breath, smile frozen in place. I didn't flinch. "Do you?" She leaned in closer. "You couldn't just let me have this." "I did let you have it," I said quietly. "You just couldn't hold on to it." Her smile cracked. "You think this makes you better than me?" "No," I said. "I know it does." She blinked, stunned at the calmness of it. Then, like a true actress, she straightened up and sipped her wine. "I should have cut you off years ago." "You never had that power," I said. "And now everyone knows it." She didn't reply. She just stood up and walked away, heels clicking like gunshots across the polished floor. Sophia nudged me from beside her. "You okay?" she whispered. I nodded, because for the first time in my life I was. Not because I had gotten revenge, but because I had finally stopped waiting for the applause. I wasn't the side character anymore. I was the author. And the story, it was just getting good. The wedding ended like most do. Laughter echoing under fairy lights. Cake smeared on plates. A tired DJ playing 2000s throwbacks for a slowly thinning crowd. But beneath the gloss and sparkle, I could feel the tension buzzing like faulty wiring behind the drywall. No one said it aloud, but everyone knew something had shifted. The next morning, my phone lit up with 3 missed calls from my mother, 2 from Dad, and a single text from Clara. "You win." I hope it was worth it. I didn't respond, because it wasn't about winning. It never was. It was about telling the truth in a place where the truth had never been welcome. And finally it was out. Irreversible. Standing in the daylight like it belonged there all along. The podcast episode had passed 300,000 plays by the end of the week. Maya messaged me. "You underestimated how many people needed to hear the story." I hadn't done any interviews, no post-wedding statements, no social media cryptic posts or subtweets. I didn't need to. The silence said enough. What happened next came slowly, then all at once. Clara's hospital board requested a formal review of her credentials. Standard protocol, but humiliating for someone who had branded herself as a rising star in her department. She wasn't fired, but the press made it clear she'd need to clarify her miscommunication. Her wedding photos were stunning, but none of the captions said what people were really thinking. And Victor, he didn't move back in. 3 weeks after the wedding, Sophia sent me a screenshot of his new LinkedIn job update. Relocated to Portland, available for consulting. No mention of Clara. My parents sent a long email around that time. A clumsy, overwritten olive branch. No apology, not really. Just vague lines like, "We were shocked by how things unfolded. We still love you deeply. Even if we don't always see eye to eye, family should stick together even when it's hard." I read it 3 times, then archived it, because love without respect is just a softer form of control. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was just done. Life, meanwhile, kept moving. My company hit another funding milestone. We opened an office in Austin. I started mentoring a group of young founders, kids who reminded me of myself at 19, full of ideas and nowhere to put them. I gave them space, tools, the one thing I never had growing up, validation. Sometimes they asked about my story. I'd tell them just enough to let them know where I came from, but never so much that it defined me. Because that was the final part of the revenge. Not the takedown, not the podcast, not the ruined fairy tale wedding, but this piece. The kind that doesn't need a spotlight. The kind that doesn't explain itself. The kind that quietly builds a better life while the people who dismissed you scrambled to rewrite their roles in your success. And one morning, almost a year after that unforgettable Thanksgiving, I got a package at my office. No return address. Inside was a hardcover family photo album, one of the old ones from our living room shelves. A note was taped to the inside cover, just 6 words written in my mother's handwriting. We should have seen you sooner. I didn't cry. I didn't call. I didn't frame it or throw it away. I just placed it on the bottom shelf of my bookcase, where it would stay silent, heavy, untouched, like a chapter one had already finished. Because my story wasn't about them anymore. It was about me, and I was finally writing it in my own words. Outro music begins. So, I have to ask you, if you were in my shoes, would you have done things differently at that Thanksgiving dinner? Or have you ever had a moment where you finally stood up for yourself and watched everything change? I really want to know what you think. Drop your comments below.